Was it easy? No. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Step 1 of Michigan's 2024 mission is complete.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Can we just play every single college football playoff semifinal at the Rose Bowl, right? The last time a CFP semi was played on these hallowed grounds in Pasadena in Southern California, it was that epic shootout between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Baker Mayfield-led Oklahoma Sooners. When you play this type of game with these types of stakes in this type of setting in Pasadena at the most hallowed stadium in all of college football, it really takes it up multiple notches, and you really saw that especially late in this game. Once the sun set and they were under the lights at the Rose Bowl, that's when this thing really got spicy. All right, let's dive into this one a little bit, because there were so many different swings of emotion. There were so many different swings of energy. There were multiple kind of segments of this football game, and it really starts in the beginning of this game when Michigan brought the heat. Jesse Minter schemed up some really, really good pressures. Alabama's offensive line was pretty confused at what was hitting them early on in this game. That's what really was the story of the first half of this football game. Michigan sacked Jalen Milroe 5 times in that first half, and I believe it was 5 different guys. It was coming from all angles. It was coming from the defensive line, where they were twisting, where they were stunting. It came from the linebacker level, from the interior of the linebackers, from the edge on the outside as well. It was coming from so many different guys and so many different angles. Alabama needed to make adjustments in the locker room at halftime. But I think that was the big key. That was the big keystone. And that was the big gem as to why Michigan really got ahead there in that first half. Their offense was pretty good. I thought this offense early on in this game, it was successful when Blake Corum got going in the early downs. There were some drives really throughout the entire 60 minutes, but I really noticed it in the first half when Michigan might come out passing on a certain drive and maybe JJ threw it behind a receiver. There were some throws where JJ wasn't exactly on target. But when they came out throwing and they maybe got behind the sticks a little bit, that's where Michigan kind of ran into trouble right there in that first half. But mixing up so many different things on defense really provided them an advantage early on in that first half. I thought the offense for Michigan in the first half, they left some things on the field. And there were some miscues as well, I think, that we got to talk about as well. Because if Michigan ended up on the short end of the stick in this one, because there's kind of 2 different narratives as it pertains to the miscues. If they were not able to overcome the adversity late in this game, if they were not able to beat Alabama, a lot of people would have looked towards 2 muff punts. They would have looked towards a fumbled snap on an extra point. They would have looked at so many different things. That overturned interception, I know that technically wasn't a miscue right away when JJ threw it into coverage right off the bat, but there were so many things throughout this game where Michigan fans were kind of scratching their head, maybe pulling their hair out a little bit. But in the end, and I talked about the narrative just a minute ago, I think the narrative now is Michigan. And this kind of goes in with what's to come here in the second half, but it's Michigan overcoming when their backs were against the wall in this game. They were never out of it. They were truly never out of this football game, because as the second half went along, we talked about in the first half about the defense, about the pressure. Jalen Milroe got free a couple of times in the first half, but for the most part, there was a lot of confusion up front for Alabama. But when we moved on to the second half, I think that's where Alabama says, we got to find a way to neutralize this pass rush. We got to find a way to do something of what Jesse Minter is dialing up on the defensive side of the ball. And that's where Michigan said, we are going to get physical. We are going to have our guys up front. We're going to have them road grade. We're going to have them run block. We're going to have them push. And we are going to try to win the line of scrimmage on the offensive side of the ball. And they did a pretty good job with that. Right? You had Jason McClellan get free. And Jalen Milroe got free a lot more in the second half of this football game. And then the big thing, special teams was huge. We talked about it a lot during Big Ten season, right? Iowa, you kind of mentioned it with them a lot this season when it came to special teams. But Alabama continuously pinning Michigan deep in that third quarter. That third quarter, Michigan was living. This game was being played in Michigan territory. Nick Saban was all about making Michigan go 90-plus yards down the field. Michigan was not able to do that in the third quarter of this football game. Like, you look at the special teams in this game, Alabama had a big-time special teams advantage. I already mentioned some of the miscues for Michigan, but you look at 2 field goals of 50-plus yards, the punting, right, as I mentioned, pinning Michigan back multiple times. In that third quarter, the special teams was really on point for the Alabama Crimson Tide throughout this game, and Michigan had a really tough time when they were kind of pinned back in their own territory. But as this game kind of progressed eventually into the fourth quarter, Alabama appeared to be wearing down Michigan a little bit. They were gaining a lot more momentum in terms of them running the football, in terms of their strength up front. They were controlling the time of possession. Michigan wasn't able to move the football as much. But then when all seemed out, when all seemed like Alabama was going to maybe go down the field, make it a double-digit game, Michigan did exactly what they needed to do when they needed to do it. For as much as Alabama was maybe controlling up front, and for as good as Alabama was playing, and for maybe as little offensive production there was in the third quarter and early fourth quarter for Michigan, things just eventually turned on for the Wolverines. They needed to make a play because J.J. McCarthy was okay throughout the first 3 quarters within this game. He made some good throws. Some other throws weren't as hot. But when his back was against the wall, when plays needed to be made, and you could say this about J.J. McCarthy for the entire season, when plays needed to be made in this game, he made the plays. He drove them all the way down the field, and Michigan got into the end zone. I felt when this game was tied, when Michigan late in the game, when they needed to make plays, and they made plays, when J.J. McCarthy came up big and they eventually tied this football game, I had this feeling in my gut that said, there's no denying them now. I felt that momentum late in the game, and really ever since that Jalen Milroe fumble, I know Michigan did not get any points out of that fumble. But from then on, because before that, Michigan was driving down the field. Michigan was playing really well within the trenches. After that fumble, things seemed to change. That was the glimmer of hope that the Michigan Wolverines needed to be able to win this football game. That was it. Because before that, there wasn't a ton of hope throughout the third quarter and early in the fourth quarter. This was all about Michigan making the plays, completing the first step of their mission when they absolutely needed to. This was about what I expected from this game. I predicted Michigan 24, Alabama 21. You knew this game was going to be tough. You knew this game was going to be physical, but I want to end on this. I said this a month ago, 2 months ago, I can't exactly remember when. And it's been a tough bowl season, especially in the last couple of days for the Big Ten against the SEC. When you want to try to shift the narrative, when people mention the term SEC bias, it's because of the SEC's victories in these types of football games. With Michigan being able to beat Alabama in this type of football game, it's not going to happen all at once, folks. But maybe this is the start of the turn for things within the Big Ten going forward. What a matchup. I can't wait to see what happens in the national championship for the Michigan Wolverines in Houston, Texas. But they overcame some pretty good adversity late in this game. Even yours truly had a little bit of doubt. But in the end, Michigan powers through and they're advancing to the national championship.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.